As you show in my slide, in my first title slide, I would like to speak about the minority education system in Hungary, especially about the minority education system for Roma students. You see in the title, I would like to talk about this interesting situation of the minority education. As I signed in the title, I would like to speak about the opportunities of this education system, especially about the legal background and the legal possibilities of the education system, because the Hungarian legal background gives free and many possibilities for the minority schools, as the Roma minority education too. But there are many difficulties, as it used to be. The legal background and the real life has an interesting situation. Let's talk about the legal background of this nationalities education system in Hungary. And we have to go back into the times of the system changing in the early 90s, because there was some important act in Hungary, especially the Minority Act, which speaks about the educational opportunities of the minorities in the country. So, as you see, the system change opened up many new opportunities in the education of Roma too, and other nationalities too in Hungary. And this act, I don't want to read the title, Act in 1990 on local governments, as well as the later Act in 1993 about the law on the rights of national and ethnic minorities in Hungary, provided the frameworks for national and ethnic minorities in Hungary. This law is the first which act name and recognize the nationality status of the Hungarian Roma, and the two languages, the Romani language and the Beas language, used in the South Trans-Danubian region of the country. And these two languages they use in Hungary. And this act provides the same opportunity for education as the other nationalities, the classical nationalities of the country. Later, additional provisions passed in the early 2000s were very important from an educational policy point of view, but at the same time, they were not entirely favorable in terms of the education of the Bolyás and Romani languages. In any case, it can be considered a positive change in 3 years later, 2003, after the new Public Education Act. The guidelines of this act for ethnic education were also changed, thanks to which all former elements aim to catching up with especially social disadvantages. The former act, the viewing point approach was this social disadvantages and catching up the social background of the students. So there is a change in approach, and let's speak about the ethnic approach of this question. Moreover, according to this Ministry decree about the education, schools could request a separate normative support, a so-called personal quote for every student in the school taught in these educational programs, minority education programs. This normative support for the teaching of Roma folklore and any Roma languages, it depended on the number of pupils taught in the school. The later act in 2011, title is Law and the Rights of Nationalities. It's a new version of the former minority law. No longer only includes the official recognition of the Roma languages spoken in Hungary, but also defines and recognizes the Roma minority as a nationality and at the same status as the other minority groups in the country. And not as I mentioned, not an ethnic group as before. The Act from 2011, National Public Education, entered into force in the next year. The provisions of the National Basic Curriculum, issued as an annex to the law, determine the framework and conditions of ethnic education in Hungary, including the contents and frameworks for Roma folk studies too. For the classes from 9 to 12 and the classes in the lower levels of the education too. So the National Basic Curriculum is the framework curriculum of the subject were prepared. The framework and tasks of nationality education are defined in 2013. It's a ministerial decree, designates the guideline for the kindergarten education of the nationality and the guideline for the school education of the nationality. According to the decree, if at least 8 parents belonging to the same nationality, so a group of parents, initiate the nationality kindergarten education or nationality school education, must be organized in the next school year following the receipt of this application. So it's very important that the group of parents initiate this education by the law. Let's see the negative impact of these legislative changes. The implementation of nationalities education and language education is challenged by the fact that based on the legislative changes of 2012, there are no longer supplementary norms for nationalities education, and there is a change, and there is a task funding is implemented from this year. So the number of institutions undertaking nationalities education also decreases, despite the fact that this should be realized based on parental request. It's not legally regulated that just qualified folklore teachers can teach this subject, just nor the other ethnic folklore subjects. The basic curriculum emphasizes that it's a complex subject involving several scientific fields, for example, ethnographical topics, history, social geography, and so on, which is why the training of qualified nationalities folklore teachers is essential and need, but the real life, not the same. A specialized diploma is not yet necessary in the teaching of folklore and language teaching for nationalities. That's why the Roma language and folk studies teacher training course that has been running for more than 10 years, for example, at our University of Pécs, attracts few interested parties. The question is, what motivates the school in real life to start this Roma nationality education program? That is the motivation of professional dedication of the schools, or the high number of Roma pupils attending the school, or there is a parental will in the background, or the need to maintain a school and have the teacher's job in real days. It can often be questioned whether nationality education is really started in a given institution based on parental request, or whether the school's maintenance is behind the institutional decision. In schools participating in nationality education, it is possible to start a class with as few as 8 students, while in non-nationality education schools, in the case of institutions, a minimum of 15 students is required to start the first class. It can be a motivation in the background. Also, the introduction of the nationality program can save a teaching job in some cases. There are different types of the nationality education in Hungary. As you see in the slide, the nationality education can be organized according to the following forms of education. It can be education in the mother language. It can be a bilingual nationality education in the mother language or in both in Hungarian, or a language teaching nationality education. And there is a fourth type, so-called Roma or Gypsy. In Hungary, use this word in everyday life, Gypsy. Roma Gypsy nationality education in Hungarian language, because in case of the Roma nationality, the situation of the Romani and Bajas languages doesn't allow for the organization of marathon or bilingual nationality education, which is why it's included in a separate way, a separate category as Roma Gypsy nationality education in Hungarian language. There are some statistical facts. I like the numbers and the data. In January of this year, there are almost 400 institutions where different Roma nationality programs goes in the institutions. There are many kindergartens, 214 elementary schools, with a total of almost 13,000 students are listed on the list of institutions running programs called Hungarian language, Roma, Gypsy cultural education, or ethnic education. In addition, mother language Romani is taught in 5 places, traditional language teaching in 6 institutions, Romani language programs in 6, and bilingual BH education in 2 places in the country. We are confident that the creation of these important programs is not only generated by coloring the profile of the given school or ensuring the number of hours of the existing teaching staff, but is in line with the will of the parents and the intention to strengthen the identity for Roma or Gypsy students, to nurture minority culture and values, is motivated by the goal of its preservation. We can speak about new changes in this legal background. In the appendix of the Nationality Guidelines of National Core Curriculum in 2020, it not only reduces the previous number of lessons from 3 lessons per week to just one, but also enables the teaching of nationality knowledge integrated into the other subjects. So not separated nationality education courses, but we can teaching the information, the topics in the normal geography classes, in history, in Hungarian literature, and so on. The question is, where will the professional content go? This requires change requires that colleagues teaching general subject, the geography teacher, literature teacher, music teacher, history teacher, have to have deep professional knowledge about the Roma culture, about the Roma population. Unfortunately, it hasn't yet been generally incorporated into the teacher training system in Hungary, so that prospective teacher students encounter content about the Roma population, the life and situation, social background of the Roma population at the curriculum level. A refreshing exception is that the basic of Romology, that is the title of this course, this lesson is included as a compulsory subject at the teacher training at our university. So every teacher, to be teacher, have to know something about the Roma population. We had several researches about the general textbooks. As I mentioned, it required that, for example, geography textbooks, whether they has information about the Roma or not. I made these researches focused on the extent to which nationality content, which is mandatory according to curriculum regulations, appears in public education textbooks. After all, if folkloric content is integrated into these subjects, then it is responsibility, for example, of the geography teacher, history teacher, and so on, to present them in class, in the classrooms. The central state development of textbooks started in Hungary, but these researches have shown that the general knowledge textbooks rarely contain any information about nationalities, especially not about the Roma nationality. For example, we found in the geography textbooks that only 4 of these textbooks had any information about the Roma community. This was also stereotypical and prejudiced topic in 3 cases. In 13 textbooks we had not find any information. The higher education institutions responsible for teacher training don't provide, as I mentioned, former teachers with guidance on how to perform these tasks in everyday life in classrooms. There are those teacher training places in our country where the inclusion of this knowledge in the training process appears as a conscious effort, thus in the Institute of Education of University in Pécs, where Romology courses are mandatory elements of the teacher training. Elsewhere, teacher candidates can optionally take related subjects. However, to this day, this content is not a natural and general part of the practices of teacher training in the country. I had another research about the folk textbooks, the nationality folk textbooks for Roma children. The range of Roma folk books in trade and in use is not very wide. Although the process started after the regime change in the early 19th, primarily from the intention of authors coming from the community, Roma community. It is not a problem. It's good for Roma authors try to write textbooks for Roma children. But as I saw, the quality of these textbooks not always the best. The aim of these authors reflecting on community needs, the process that has since then encouraged authors to create more and more folkloric books. And later, the education policy also began to support the official publication of these textbooks. The activity has not yet achieved success. The development of folklore books faces many difficulties, and their content has many professional shortcomings. During the research on Roma nationality textbooks, we observed 16 materials, 14 textbooks, and 2 workbooks for the education in this period. Among these books, there are those that have since been taken out of trade due to their problematic nature and content and approach, and other books that are still used until today. There are some typical problems of these books. For example, the historical and contemporary social and cultural characteristics and situation of Roma are derived in an analogous way from the perspective of thousands of years. Everything comes from India, everything comes, what I see in nowadays, from the Indian thousands. The books and the authors not recognizing of the fact of changing in the social life, the changing in the history and the social economical background, of the influence and changes of cultures to each other. They often think about the generalized characteristics of Roma in an essentialist way, stereotyped and let's face it, often prejudiced and unpleasant approaches are mixed in these writings. There are some examples. The sentence is in Hungarian, but I try to translate directly into English. For example, how the author speaks about the Roma culture. The Indian origin of gypsies is shown by the body shape of the gypsies, for example, dark skin color and black hair. And another text, the migrating ethnic groups living in India, especially the women, like colorful red, yellow, blue, green clothes, as is also typical of the Roma. They like spicy food, so that is the evidence of the Indian origin. It is worth thinking about the fact, says the author, that wherever the Roma appeared, they never came armed. Perhaps the only nation that never had any army. This may be cultural evidence of Indian origins, of course, but say me. The crafts of the ancestors brought from India were passed down from father to son, so they were not forgotten, but they were not further developed them either. The custom, it's interesting, the custom brought from India, eating with the hands, was kept. Listing these texts, the evidence of the origin that is only probative for these authors. Just a picture from India speaking about the Roma community in Hungary. For example, a textbook speaks about these ancient times in Moldavia and ancient Romanian kingdom, and says there were shameful places in the history of gypsies. In these countries, the state considered gypsies as slaves. They were thrown into slavery. And in the background, the pictures will show the ancient Egyptian slave system and American slaves. So it is not a good concept, I think. Let's speak about the Roma language and culture teacher training at the University of Pécs, because in a university since 2013 there has been a Beas language and culture teacher training and Roma language and culture teacher training as a major. It's also possible to obtain a degree in the framework of a short-cycled, specialized additional training for teachers, and the further training courses specializing in Roma social studies has also been launched. At the time, since the starting, the number of students who have obtained a diploma in these majors can be estimated between 10 to 20. However, since the requirement of education required for Gypsy and Roma ethnic education is still an unsolved problem, there is little interest in these majors. An investigation in 2015 showed that among the institutions where Roma education had not real content, the teachers entrusted with the task didn't have the knowledge and the material conditions that would be necessary to teach these subjects. And there is a new research. PhD student in our doctoral school wrote the dissertation, and the topic of this dissertation to examination of these minority programs. And I picked some graphs from this dissertation because it's a new one. The slide shows the number of institutions teaching Roma folklore and Beas languages and Romani language. The different rates of these schools where the education is only on Roma folklore and Beas language, the folklore and Romani language, folklore, Romani and Beas language, just in one institution. That is the Gandhi Secondary School in Pécs, which secondary school dedicated especially for Roma students, pupils. The picture is not the best, but this slide, this graph shows the number of Beas and Romani language learner pupils per the classes in that school year 2020-2021. We can see that in elementary school we will find the highest number of the pupils, and of course in these classes in the secondary school the number of pupils decreasing. Let's talk about the number of teachers teaching this Beas language or Romani language in the schools according to their qualification, and we will see in the first line those who has education level by the law, education in accordance with the legal requirements to teach any languages, need diploma of teaching and language exam on this C2 level, and we will find in 4 cases in Beas education and in 6 cases in Romani education the normal requirements in the background. And in this in these lines we will show that teachers that education doesn't meet with the legal requirements. There is 2 teachers in Beas and 3 teachers in Romani, where the teacher has diploma but a lower level of the language exam. Just language exam in 1 case, just language exam in a lower level in 1 case, and any diploma without language exam in 1 case. That teacher teach the language. In this slide, you can see the number of institutions teaching Beas and Romani according to the types of teaching materials used for language teaching. We will see in the first column the self-made material, because the teacher feeling that the official textbooks are not the best, so let's make self-made materials. In the second column we will see that the official textbooks is in the background to helping the teaching, and they will use digital material for the language teaching. And we can see the number of students studying Roma folklore without language teaching, learning per classes in these examined 90 institutions in this academic year. Also, the situation the same, that we will find the pupils in the primary schools and in the secondary school. The folklore teaching is decreasing. And it's very interesting for me because the slide shows the education background of lecturers teaching these folk studies. And we will see that the most number of teachers just have a teacher, any type of teacher's diploma. Oh, I forgot to translate the title of these slides. Excuse me. Why the schools initiated minority education? They just wanted to make the profile of the school more colorful. In these cases, the parents initiated the starting of the program, and there is the need of the remain the school, not close the school. And I try to translate the slide. I think it is the last slide that's important for me, because from whom do the institutions expect helping in this situation? Who they ask help for the quality teaching of Bolyás, Romani or folklore subjects? These schools says, I'm not waiting for any help. We will solve the problem necessary in the house with my colleagues. These schools says that from the national Roma municipality, but I think the national Roma municipality is a legal and political institution, not a methodological, pedagogical helping background. This green part of the schools ask help from the parents of the students, from the state. Of course, the state is in the background, and the yellow shows any other cases. But for example, we have a network to help the schools, a methodological network, because we do this teacher training. The schools doesn't think about us, doesn't think the university as a teacher training helping organization for us. We will solve the problem in the house, each other. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't know the time was it enough for me or not? Thank you very much.